So, guys, I want to say that I've been going to the All Elite Wrestling shows as part of a road trip. So I'm going to go to actually, five of them, and then I'm actually going to the Full Gear pay-per-view. But unfortunately, with AEW, that the ratings have been going down. So I want to give you guys at least 13 reasons why I feel the AEW ratings have been going down. And I think that, hopefully AEW will listen to this and become a better program. The first reason is that the Moxley storyline makes no sense. And we all kind of know this, that the reason why they had the Moxley storyline was because Daniel Bryan wanted John Moxley to be the one to take the championship off of him. I also feel, like I've said before, that Darby Allin was not the right person. It should have been Adam Page, because Adam Page was like the hottest wrestler in the company. And I also feel that the other thing that I would say is that you could have even done something like have Swerve Strickland retain, and then maybe at October you could have had Swerve versus Adam Page, or you could have done that at All Out, Swerve versus Adam Page, and then have Adam Page as a champion. So Moxley's not the right storyline. He's shoehorning himself. And then the other issue is that Moxley, when he speaks, he doesn't make any sense. He's contradicting himself. He's saying things like he wants everybody to step up to the plate, but nobody deserves to step up to the plate. And it just doesn't make any sense, really. It's just, I think he's shoehorned in there. The way he articulates himself is that he kind of contradicts himself a lot. He kind of comes off as like a poor man's Bray Wyatt, really. So, you can't have your main storyline with somebody who doesn't, who doesn't talk correctly or contradicts himself, so it's really confusing. The next point I want to make is, as I said, Adam Page should be the AEW champion, not Moxley or Darby, because the original plan was going to be Darby Allin. And I think with Darby Allin, the problem is that he's not going to be a good champion because there's only one style of match that he has, and the style of match that he has is like hardcore stuff. And then the other problem is that, you run the risk of him having a last match with Bryan Danielson. If they did that at Wrestle Dream, what would happen if you had Bryan Danielson in like a hardcore match? That's not really his style. And then the other issue you have is you kind of run into the Brody King situation or the Brian Cage situation. You have a small guy beating a bunch of big guys, really, So when you have Darby Allin as a champion, he can be a champion. It's like, you have to book him as like this underdog type of wrestler, really. And I just don't think that they know how to do that. I think they'll just have him run through big people like it's nothing, when he should kind of be, taking his time, really, and having different types of opponents that are kind of at his level, really, So I really think that with Darby Allin, he's not that right person, really. And I also think that, they should have really thought about making him champion right after the Sting retirement thing, because that's when he was super hot, really. So I really think that, they've missed the opportunity with Darby Allin. And then also, you also run the risk of having a small guy beating a bunch of bigger guys, and that can't be happening. What's going to happen if you have Darby Allin as the world champion and then you have Bobby Lashley? Are you going to make it a squash match? Are you going to make it a 50-50 match? Or are you going to make it so Bobby Lashley can't beat a person that doesn't look like he weighs more than 120 pounds, really, So it's he's not the right champion. I've talked about Moxley. Adam Page is the right person, because like I've said, after he burned down Swerve's house, he was the most popular guy in the company. He should not be feuding with Jay White. That is such a backseat to him. I think that if you had Adam Page versus Bryan Danielson, I think that would be getting the most amount of attention, really. And even if you did something like have Swerve and the Hurt Syndicate come back at Adam Page, that would have been really good. If you have Adam Page versus Bobby Lashley, I think that would be the place to go in. He's the most he seems to me to be like the toughest AEW wrestler right now, because you see all the violent things he does outside of the ring, how far he just takes things a little too far, really. And then also with AEW is very unapologetic, really. So why not have a champion that represents it? I think he's the right person to be champion now. And the only thing that they can really do is that they can pivot to Adam Page versus John Moxley at World's End. Or you can do something like, just announce that Orange Cassidy's injured, and then you set up Moxley versus Adam Page at the at like the next show that they're doing in Bridgeport. But I really think that you get more mileage out of Moxley versus Adam Page, and then eventually Adam Page become the world champion. Then you can do Adam Page versus Swerve, or Adam Page, versus the world, really, So, and then because he's so violent and crazy, it's realistic that a person like Bobby Lashley or somebody else would have a struggle like beating him a little bit because of how relentless or how far he takes things. So I really think that he should be the world champion. There's a lot of really great, talking points for that. Mox is not the right one, and Darby's not the right one. Mark Briscoe and Jericho is becoming repetitive. Like nonstop, it's usually Jericho and Mark Briscoe having ladder matches, having table spots, seeing Briscoe set up the chairs and doing a flip over it. Like they've done that a lot. They've had a bunch of hardcore matches, really, So they need to find different opponents. I did a fancy booking of Dustin Rhodes versus Jericho, but this is starting to get a little repetitive. If you really want Ring of Honor to stand out, couldn't Jericho do something like a Ring of Honor Open Challenge? They all like maybe once a week or every 2 weeks, somebody from Ring of Honor comes down and they face Jericho in a match and they come close, and there's like a 2 out of 3 falls match, at a pay-per-view, and they and somebody faces Jericho, and then on Ring of Honor you see people work hard and go through a bunch of loops and obstacles, or challenge Big Bill and Brian Keith, or challenge 3 or 4 people that Jericho believes in, and do something like that. There's so much that you can do with Jericho as the Ring of Honor champion, instead of just going through Mark Briscoe a bunch of times. And there's more that Mark Briscoe can do. He should not be feuding with Jericho anymore. They could have easily done something where the Moxley faction and the conglomeration, that should have been a match at Full Gear. That shouldn't have been a television show match. And also, too, they could have set up a blood and guts match, really. I think that would have been a big money match at Full Gear. But having just them kind of run through each other or do hardcore stuff with each other over and over, it's really run its course, really. They have to, give it a rest, really. It's not good. Orange Cassidy is not a world champion. So that just means, what I've said about Orange Cassidy. He's Mr. Comedy Kicks. He's a comedy wrestler. He's a very smaller person, really. I think he's like a poor man's Kenny Omega, really. Again, what's going to happen if you have Bobby Lashley versus Orange Cassidy? It has to be a squash match, just like Lesnar and Kofi Kingston. So you run the risk of that. He can't take things seriously. He says something like, I'm going to become the AEW champion. I'm going to take that belt and I'm going to put it in my backpack. So, he can't really, stop with the comedy, So, and as I said, his signature move is the comedy kicks, So, he's not the champion that people want to see. If you really want to make a pay-per-view, especially in the New York area, I would have Adam Page versus Moxley. That would be, you don't know where they're going to go with that. That would be the best match to have, really. Or you can do something like the 3 stages of hell. You would have, Adam Page versus Pac. You would have Claudio versus Pac. And you would also have Moxley versus Adam Page, really. So you would probably do something like that just to kind of put some doubt into people. But that would be the thing that you guys would do, So definitely, as I said, Orange Cassidy does not feel to me he has that. He's not violent enough. He's not ruthless enough. He's just kind of a comedy wrestler. He feels awkward. He has a very bad voice. Really, he reminds me of maybe a younger Drew Carey. He has a bit of the Ace Ventura type of look, So again, he's not the right person to be representing AEW unless you do something like he fights with Moxley, he loses. People come out and cheer him, and then he joins the Moxley faction, really. That's the only thing that you guys can do. But Orange Cassidy's not a world champion. There's an anti-AEW cult of personality. So, obviously, AEW was overly praised when it started. It was overrated when it started. So, sometimes when, something's overrated, people will talk badly about it in the future because now people are more focused on the flaws because people weren't as focused on the flaws. So, AEW was a bit overrated. So now I think that there may be an overly negative reaction. Next reason, nobody wants to see Mina Shirakawa versus Mariah May. This is a really great point, because the thing is that we run into this issue of the Japanese wrestlers in AEW. Like, I have no problem with Japanese wrestlers in any company, but you have to do a good job of building up people. Like, you don't have Emi Sakura versus Mercedes Moné when you're going up against NXT. You would have Paige versus Mercedes Moné. You would have Anna Jay or somebody that people know that's been established, or Britt Baker. You don't throw in people that people don't know about. And then with Mina Shirakawa, there's really, I know there's a bit of a story, but that's not the best person, really. You would have to do, as I said, like a Paige, Nyla Rose, Jade Cargill, or somebody else established that people know, like Athena or somebody like that, really. You know, like, so, or even like if you could do even Anna Jay, and that would have been better, really, because people know who she is, really. But you don't take, you know, some Japanese wrestler that doesn't wrestle that much, that's not featured on television consistently, and have them in pay-per-view matches. That's not the person to bring ratings to, you know, because, again, most people don't know who the hell this person is. And as I said, it feels like Marvel versus Capcom, where you're taking, like, out of all the people in Marvel versus Capcom, it's like you're taking Spider-Man and having him face Jubilee, or Pure and Fur, or the Unknown Soldier, or Thor, or Juggernaut, or a superhero most people don't know about. You get my point, really. Like, you don't just take wrestlers that people don't know about and you lead to pay-per-view matches, or you lead to other matches on television, and especially they can't talk or articulate themselves in English. You know, another great example is Tomohiro Ishii. Like, they may have Tomohiro Ishii versus Chris Jericho at a Ring of Honor main event, or they may have that on a Ring of Honor television show, or a Ring of Honor match at Full Gear. But most people don't know who Tomohiro Ishii is. I've not seen him get on the microphone and act like a big badass or whatever. So you have to kind of understand that, you know, Mariah May and Mina Shirakawa is not going to make money. If you make Paige a babyface, if you make Anna Jay a babyface, if you make Britt Baker a babyface, Nyla Rose, Athena, or, you know, somebody else who can connect with the American audience, that works. Or if you have Mina Shirakawa give segments and she actually does a good job and gets over with people in a big way, then that works. But I don't think that that's the right move, and I don't think she's capable of that. She can prove me wrong. I appreciate the continuity, but they need transcendent storylines. So this is a big one. This is like a hydrogen bomb. I really appreciate that they are trying to set up matches and trying to give you a bit of story and explain why things happen. That's very, very important, so it doesn't feel like you're putting two people together. But a transcendent storyline is something that hits your emotions. A great example is Randy Orton doing whatever it takes to beat John Cena. Like, he's attacking John Cena's father. Like, that's the level of emotional transcendence we need. So if you have something like Daniel Garcia versus Jack Perry, you know, Daniel Garcia says something like, you know, he wants to make his mother proud. He visits his mom and says, you know what, I'm doing well for myself, and I actually just want to, you know, make you proud. And you have his mom backstage, and like, maybe she's not feeling well, she's in a wheelchair. So you have the match, and then you show backstage that MJF, like, you know, does something like, you know, pushes Jamie Garcia's mom over while she's in a wheelchair, or even like kind of set up like like, you know, you don't see her, but you kind of see the shadow of it or whatever, really, and stuff like that, really, that type of getting under your skin. Or you do something like I told you about Dustin Rhodes becoming the ROH champion. You set it up as like, he says something like, I think this is my last year in the business. I've always felt like a loser because I've not been the champion. And Jericho says like, okay, you know what, you want to be a champion, I'm going to embarrass you in Texas. And he set up like a journey of Dustin Rhodes trying to like win this last title, really. And you can even do something like have Dustin Rhodes lose through cheating by Jericho, and then the match gets reset, and then they actually have a fair match. You do something like a strong, powerful, emotional journey. You can do something like you could have something like you have backstage segments, or even some footage of Darby Allin being mentored by Bryan Danielson and talking about what it meant for him to like have Bryan Danielson's last full-time retirement match and how much he kind of regrets that, but now he wants to win the championship to honor Bryan Danielson. And then he's saying something like, you know what, I'll not have another regret, you know, and he has a match with Jon Moxley, really, and that's what you do. Or when you had Adam Page burned down Swerve's house. Then you do something like, with the Moxley faction, like they're beating up and attacking everybody. See Adam Page kind of lead the charge, really, or Orange Cassidy lead the charge. They destroy his car. They get back at them. We have the Moxley clubhouse and they burn it down or something like that. Like emotionally charged things is transcendent, and they have to kind of throw in all that stuff. Really, it would absolutely work. Or you can even do something with the Hurt Syndicate. They can talk about being black wrestlers, and they can talk about how, with the Nation of Domination, Vince actually canceled that because he was like saying that a group of that, nobody would have believed that a group of black people can be a top faction. You can talk about all these wrestlers who have a lot of potential and they want to take over AEW because they don't get the same opportunity in WWE. They learn to take what they need to take, really, and and connect with an audience of people who want to see, like, more minorities or more other people actually be featured in the right way. If you have dominant people who are of another skin color, why can't they run over a wrestling show? Why do they always have to like lose to people who like, the Moxley faction versus the Hurt Syndicate? It's clear that if they ever had a real fight, the Hurt Syndicate would beat them. So, that could be a story about emotionally charged stuff, really. So there's no like emotionally charged things. My next question is, who is Mark Davis from the United Empire? That's another next issue. Like Mark Davis, it looks like that they're doing a three-way feud between Mark Davis versus Kyle Fletcher and Kyle Fletcher versus Will Ospreay. So that could lead to Mark Davis versus Kyle Fletcher at the pay-per-view because they want United Empire to be seen as a big deal, really. But it's kind of like what I've said. Most people don't know who he is. So it goes down with this issue of when people are coming back to AEW, most people don't know who they are, really. Like Powerhouse Hobbs, a lot of people know him. They need to feature big men strongly. So if you have Hobbs versus like Takeshita, or Hobbs and Ricochet versus Fletcher and Takeshita, that'll be a good match. But you don't bring in something like Mark Davis, and you do something like Mark Davis versus Kyle Fletcher because most people don't know who the hell Mark Davis is. So it's ultimately like when people come in, you don't understand. They don't understand that there's some people that should not be featured, like prominently, and then there's some people who should. Like, if you're going to have Jamie Hayter or if you have Jamie Hayter or Britt Baker come back, that's good, but you don't have someone like Penelope Ford because most people don't know who Penelope Ford is. So you have to pick and choose who comes back and how they come back and who should be featured strongly. Like, for example, like Dalton Castle, I think that if you bring him back, he should join the Maximum Male Models and John Morrison. I think that's a good fit for him. But you don't take Dalton Castle and then you say something like we're going to have Moxley versus Dalton Castle because most people don't know who Dalton Castle is. So you got to, when you bring people back, you have to make sure you understand what roles they're in. The next thing is not understanding a slow burn. This is a huge issue with AEW. Like, for example, like WWE is doing a great job with Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley. They've had multiple matches. Same thing with the Bloodline versus Roman Reigns and all that. The thing about it is the Bloodline versus the New Bloodline. The thing is that they know how to stretch things out. And we really don't see that in AEW. I think they're a little too quick. Like, for example, I've said like about Jericho becoming the ROH champion. Like, you can stretch out his title reign to All In next year and then have Dustin take it over, and then you can stretch out Dustin for like 6 months, then have Sammy Guevara take over, and that would be the way to do it. Or you can do something like, with Private Party, you could have given them the tag team championships all the way at World's End. I understand one of the Bucks is injured, but you could have easily milked that out. But it's good that they changed it because the ratings were being hurt. The next thing that I would say is that you look at somebody like Athena and how, she's been champion for a very, very long time. I think over 700 days. And how somebody like that is going on way too long, but there's no story or whatever to kind of say something like, why do you have a champion why do you have a women's world champion? They're not really talked about and they're going on for a long time. Why is that person not going after the AEW championship? Because that's the most significant women's title, the women's AEW champion, the women's world AEW championship, not the Ring of Honor World Women's Championship. So they have a lot of wrestlers where there could be storylines that could be stretched out. There could be multiple matches that could be stretched out, but they're not really just doing that. There's things that they can definitely really saturate their time with. Like I said about Will Ospreay versus Ricochet. What would happen if you had them having a match? You had Takeshita mess that up really, and then you had Ricochet challenge the Don Callis family, and then join the Don Callis family. Then you eventually have Ospreay and Ricochet have their match at All In next year, and that's when you have it. Instead of just having a bit of a taste of it, and then you kind of have more of a featuring of it at the Wrestle Dream pay-per-view in the three-way. But, that could have, your first time, your mega match should have happened at All In. So they're not at All In 2025, really. So, this lack of building the big moments, or sometimes blowing, pay-per-view level matches on a television show, really. So I understand, the issues is with a slow burn, so that's kind of been an issue with AEW. Sometimes your biggest moment it's like with what, it's like what Vince said, your biggest moments need to be saved for your biggest shows to feel big. You don't take Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan and you end, Monday Night Raw with that, or a TV taping in Madison Square Garden for that. You ended at WrestleMania 3. So, you need to have a slow build. So that way you have enough television time and enough hype time and enough people being drawn and watching your show and wanting to see what happens. Then you kind of sell out your pay-per-views with that, so the lack of a slow burn. MVP needs to be the top faction, not Jon Moxley. MVP can talk on the microphone. He makes a lot of sense. He connects with the audience. He's wrestled in WWE. He's talked on the microphone in WWE. He needs to be the top faction. He's the most interesting person. And then you also have Bobby Lashley. They've not really had one big man run rampant all over AEW. So that's a new direction for the company. What would happen if you had a big man like Bobby Lashley, run rampant and get the AEW championship? I think that's more interesting than what you see Moxley, who is an average size guy. Also, he's not a good speaker. And then you have somebody like Bobby Lashley, who's with a good speaker, really. So you're not doing something different. And then also with and if I remember correctly, I think that you had Bobby Lashley be the TNA champion with MVP being his hype man, really. So you really, really have to do something make sure that that if you want, your champion to be dominant, you have to make sure that they're presented with consistency. They're presented by themselves or with a manager that can make sense of their dialogue and their motivations and why they're targeting certain people and why they're feuding with certain people. So I really think that, as I said, I think with MVP, he would have the right presentation, and he's telling the right story. And right now he's going after people to make his Hurt Syndicate powerful, and there would be a day where he goes after, the top faction, and then he goes after the top title with Bobby Lashley, really. So if you have the right storyteller and the right faction and the right, champion to be the AEW champion within that faction, and then you have the right opponents, like Adam Page versus Bobby Lashley, and then he can take the title off of Bobby Lashley, or you can do Powerhouse Hobbs versus Bobby Lashley, or you can do something have a hardcore match with Darby Allin, and that can be realistic because you've seen Darby Allin do all this stuff, really. Or you kind of have Ospreay versus Lashley or something like that. Those could be people who take it off, really. But as I said, Moxley's not the right person. We've seen a Moxley title reign, and this is his fourth or fifth one if you count the interim championship. And then the other part of it is that, he doesn't make sense with his dialogue. He's not known for making sense. And he's also known for doing way too much hardcore stuff to a point where it feels like he's Mark Briscoe, where he over-relies on it. So I really think that, as I said, that MVP is the right person and the Hurt Syndicate is the right thing to actually lead AEW, not Moxley, so that's important. I know I mentioned this before. This is a little repetitive. Moxley and Adam Page make money, not Moxley and Orange. Moxley and Adam Page, that's a match that would make money. Adam Page is hot from Bring Down Swerve's house. There's a lot of things that make Adam Page very compelling. So if you want to make money, you would have done Moxley versus Adam Page, Orange Cassidy versus Jay White, not Adam Page versus Jay White Part 2 and Moxley versus Orange Cassidy Part 2 or 3, really. So it's ultimately taking your hottest wrestler, knowing what your hottest wrestler is, and saying, you give first preference. And then you can do Moxley versus Bobby Lashley, at Wrestle, I know at Wrestle at World's End. That's what you could have done. You know, that's good. The last thing, no, the three other things I'll say is your bonuses. There's nothing to look forward to in the women's division. Mercedes Moné, she's not that compelling. She and Chris Statlander already had matches with each other, so why should I look forward to a third time? Athena's been champion for a long time. You're not building up an opponent or somebody formidable for her. Why should I care about that? And then why should I care about Athena if she's really just, she's more like champion because there's no other person that maybe had the backstage politics or they feel like wants to kind of be consistently on the Ring of Honor thing. So there's nothing there special. And then also Mariah May, she wants to be a bastardized C- version or D- version of Tony Storm, really. So it's like a poor woman's Tony Storm. There's really nothing compelling. So, there's nothing to look forward to in the women's division. I think that you need to, say something like, okay, well, maybe Paige should be the champion. Maybe Anna Jay needs to be the champion. Maybe Mercedes Moné needs to be off television until Grand Slam in Australia and see what she can do, really. But there needs to be, you need to kind of replace all three women's champions. You need to take the title off of Athena and then put her on the women's roster and be like, okay, we got to do something with her. What if you put the title on Queen Aminata? You could do something like Mercedes Moné versus Queen Aminata, like the hard worker. You can show all the stuff that she's been doing throughout the year. Queen Aminata getting better and stronger. Have her have a bunch of matches on Rampage, Ring of Honor, on Collision and Dynamite, and then give her a match against Mercedes Moné, like, the privileged queen versus the hard-working queen, and then you can have her take the title off, give Mercedes Moné a break, maybe do a rematch at Grand Slam and see if she's the right person, really. So there's a lot of things that they can do, really, but your three champions are not that compelling. Mariah May, Athena, and Mercedes Moné, really. So you got to switch it out a bit. If it's not working, switch out the champions. And I would also say is that I think that they need to invest in storytellers. I think that one of the big problems with AEW is I think what they said is they have 30 people in their writer's room, and then what happens is Tony Khan takes all their ideas and then he actually comes up with something. It's actually interesting because I know like in World War II, they said about the Nazis, what they did is that they had generals from A to Z, really, and Z. And if you're higher up, you can kind of usurp all the other generals' orders, and then Hitler's on top of that. So there's a lot of disorganization. But the problem is that the writer's room is not really doing that many great things. I think what they should do is take 10 people, and they should have them work on Dynamite, 10 people work on Rampage. No, 10 people on Dynamite, 10 people for Rampage. No, 10 people for Rampage and Dynamite. And then 10 people for Collision and 10 people for Ring of Honor. And then what you do is you say, like, okay, well, everybody has to pair up, and what happens is that, there's 5 feuds with 10 people, and then there's another 5 feuds with another 10 people, and 5 feuds with 10 people, and then they kind of come up with storylines and opponents, and then if it's compelling and people like it, you keep those people. If they suck, you give them another chance. If they suck again, you give them a final chance, and then you kick them out, and then you replace, and then the more that they do great jobs, the more you're like, okay, well, now let's say if you have a great feud of, let's say, The Righteous in Ring of Honor and Dustin and Sammy Guevara, if the person running that feud is doing a great job, you say something like, okay, we're going to reward you by, having the match on a either Ring of Honor pay-per-view, or if they don't want to do that anymore, a slow burn, they can say something like, we're going to put that on World's End to give everybody something to look forward to. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of reward those feuds and the storylines that are being built well by putting it on Full Gear. No, putting it on AEW shows. But I think that that's the best thing to do it. And then that way you kind of like put in new writers as well and recycle writers. So I think that that's the biggest thing that Tony Khan has to invest in is better writers. And then also understanding that, if he has, maybe 1 or 2 stories that he's really in charge of, like the main event title, and if he's not doing a good job, he needs to bring in extra help, really. And if they need to kind of filter him out, no problem, really. But he needs to kind of learn collaboration, or learn that the current system's not working. But if you invest in good writers and you kind of cycle through a bunch of writers and you have your right group, really, then what's going to happen is that you do two things. You have those people, you write great television, you bring in like your next generation and have them learn from these people, study these people, and create more compelling storylines. But I really think the investment needs to be on emotionally charged, what I call emotional transcendent, but emotionally charged writing, emotionally charged storylines, and having the right wrestlers do those things. Like you don't take Team AEW, which has John Silver and the Dark Order, which have been joke wrestlers, or you don't take Satnam Singh and the Jeff Jarrett faction and they do the joke strut and all that. Those are not the people to have. You have a person like Danny Garcia trying to make something of himself. You have a person like you have a person like Mark Briscoe trying to make something of himself, and you make a person like Adam Page who can lead that group make something of himself. You don't do something like have like joke wrestlers like Dark Order. Even if you promise them something, do that. You say, no, we have a change of plan because we don't think you're serious enough. I'm sorry, but that's show business, kid. And I think that's the big one. And then I also will say, in addition to that, every show needs a purpose. What you do is that, Dynamite is to feature your main roster, your money drawers. That's the purpose of Dynamite. Rampage is supposed to be that if you have too many matches or too many things that are stretched out, really, on Dynamite, you put that on Rampage. And that's the purpose of that, I feel. Then I think Collision, the purpose of Collision is to take a bunch of wrestlers that are more of a mid-card act and you kind of help them become bigger and stronger and get television exposure, and then you kind of build pay-per-view matches. So I really think that, for Collision, that's a show for like Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay. And you also can have like the tag team wrestlers or the trios wrestlers on that show, really, and have really compelling stuff. And then, you build matches for Full Gear. So it's almost like, preparing people for the main show. You have people like Athena on that show and a lot of women on that show to kind of be like, okay, we want it to be on Dynamite. We want to go after the main championship. So that's really what it should be. It should kind of be like featuring your next in line, really. And then there's people who are at a developmental level, or there's people who got purchased from Ring of Honor, or there's people that may not be doing so well on AEW Dynamite, but there's some future in them. And then you put them all in Ring of Honor, and you kind of have great matches with them, and they build towards, being on a Collision, on a Rampage, or on a Dynamite. And then you say something like, okay, well, there's one or two matches that are doing so well, we should just put that on like maybe the preliminary show, or even like on the pay-per-view show. Like I always think that, and as I said before, that if I ran AEW, the women's ROH championship and the men's ROH championship, that should always be defended at all. And so that way you give a person new exposure. Because like I said, imagine if you did that with Dustin, and if you did that with Dustin and Chris Jericho, then you did that with Dustin and Sammy in the future. Or what would happen if you did something like, you have Big Bill and Jericho do that? Imagine how much that would do for Big Bill. Imagine how many people would want to see Dustin finally win a heavyweight title. Imagine what would happen if Dustin became a heavyweight championship and has a match with the person he's mentoring, Sammy Guevara. Imagine how emotionally charged and compelling that would be. And imagine what would happen if you had Athena and you'd said something like, okay, she's doing a great job, but we want to kind of give her something nice because she's been the ROH champion. So what would happen if you had somebody like Layla Hirsch, Queen Aminata, Nyla Rose, or somebody else, like have a great match with her and she drops the title at Texas? Or what would happen if you have someone like Dalton Castle, who's been in Ring of Honor for a long time, and it's him versus Jericho, and he wants to go from this joke wrestler to a more serious wrestler? Or what would happen if you did something like have Dustin Rhodes become the ROH champion, and then you hear Christian Cage's music, and then Christian takes the title, he gets nuclear heat, and then they have another match, another Texas show a little bit later, like a Ring of Honor Texas show, and you see Dustin now become a champion and now have a long reign. So like you give every show, their titles, you give every show their storylines, you give every show like certain wrestlers, and you don't kind of cross over unless you're doing a major pay-per-view. But I think then that way you're like, okay, now I gotta watch Collision because now that's the only show I'm gonna see the trios champion. Now I'm gonna watch Ring of Honor because that's the only show I'm gonna see the ROH people. I know that the ROH show is a show where you see wrestlers that need more time, or you meet developmental people, and they go there for a while and they do a great job, and then they go over to either Collision or Dynamite, and I get to see their multi-year long journey on becoming established people, like with Trick Williams, Ilya Dragunov, Roman Reigns, Bray Wyatt, Seth Rollins, and many other wrestlers in NXT going to the WWE main roster. Or you see somebody like CM Punk, who he was not on the WWE main roster. He went to ECW. People watching ECW because of him, then he went over to the main roster. Or you see wrestlers like John Cena, who was on SmackDown for a long time, and then he went over to WWE Raw when people felt that he was a main event guy, really. So each show should have its purpose. Each show should have its titles. When you divide the titles, it's a good thing because that way you kind of can establish a hierarchy. Like on Collision, it should be the it should be either it should be the trios titles, it should be the TNT title, and it should be the Ring of Honor Championship as their heavyweight title. That should be Collision. And then for Ring of Honor, it should be all the AEW, all the Ring of Honor titles. But also you can do something like have the Ring of Honor champion go between the three brands, but mostly be on Collision. And that should also be the women's Ring of Honor World's title. On the AEW show, you should have the International Championship, the AEW Women's Championship, the AEW World Tag Championship, and the AEW Heavyweight Championship, but also the Women's TBS Championship that needs to be on Collision as well, really. So separating the belts would be good. That way you kind of can create different divisions, and you feature wrestlers that are going to be featured dominantly on one show or another show, really. So like I've said, it's almost like, as a lot of people say about AEW, it's just that they have the right people, but they don't have the right execution, and that's kind of why they do 500,000 views.